Those of you who watched the router lift go into the table saw wing saw me use one of these things. This is a brass Porter cable style router guide bushing sold at Harbor Freight, where else, a pack of 7 for right around 10 bucks if you print out one of the 20% off coupons. You also saw me make that cut with my Harbor Freight plunge router. And those of you who have this router know, maybe those of you who are considering it don't know, this base plate doesn't accept this style of guide bushing. And this is how I fixed that problem. Nothing better than trying to show something clear on camera. What this is a 3/8 inch thick piece of round plexiglass that is an aftermarket router base that is drilled every which way from Sunday to try and fit as many routers as possible. And sure enough, there is a hole pattern on here that will fit this router. You start by removing the 3 screws that hold the old base onto the router. Don't lose them. You need them to put the new base on. There is a complication here because the Harbor Freight router base is not flat. It has this set of ridges right here, which are what align the factory base plate when you put it on there. And they also provide the mounts for the factory dust collection shroud. Because the screws that hold the dust collection shroud stick up even further, this thing unfortunately is going to have to come off. You're going to lose dust collection while you're using the guide bushing. It's just kind of life with this particular router. Even with that gone, it's not perfectly flat, so here's your options. You can bust out the Dremel tool and you can grind or cut these things down flat, but to me that's a little bit drastic if you ever want to put it back together in the original configuration. Well, it turns out that these ridges are the same exact thickness as these 832 washers that I have laying around. So what I'm going to do instead of hacking up the router is I'm just going to introduce these washers as spacers from the factory holes. That will allow my replacement plate to sit flat and flush on the bottom of the router. On FYI, these 3 holes right here are the ones where the factory plate mounts, but it has the standard sort of Porter cable drill pattern out here offset about, 1 clock position from that to the left. When you replace the screws, you only want to start them in. Don't want to tighten them because you want this base plate, for now, to be able to slide around. That's because the bushing set comes with this golf tee looking contraption that helps you exactly center the base plate on your router. You drop the guide bushing into the hole in the center, and that is a real tight fit. It's not exact, but it's real close. It's probably only off by about 1/1000th or so. You drop one of the bushings into the hole in the base plate, and you put this down through it, and you compress the router base so that you can go all the way down into the collet. When you tighten up the collet nut, you know that this piece is exactly centered where your router bit is going to be centered. You just release the tension on the base, and because of the tapered shape of this, the whole thing will self-center. Now you can go back and tighten down the screws, and you can be sure that this base plate is now situated such that any bushing you put in there is going to be exactly centered. The base plate where I need it, now I can drop in the correct size bushing, and it has this brass nut that goes on the back to hold it in place. The 3/4 inch bearing, I have a 1/2 inch straight bit that goes in here. And now voila, when you plunge down, you have a perfectly centered bit inside of your bushing. Well, it's a simple change to the router, and if you do it this way, it can be undone. It's also relatively cheap, which is a good thing because honestly, how often you need to use these old style of bushings is one of those things that's going to sort of depend on the kind of work that you do. And it's definitely not a perfect solution here. Having to use the washers as spacers means that your base plate is not in contact with the entire bottom of the router. But at 3/8 of an inch thick, this thing is plenty stiff that those 3 points plus those ridges in the center is more than enough to keep it stable and flat. And it's unfortunate that you have to lose this gizmo because template routing is one of those times when it would be really nice to have dust collection. In fact, when I did the test cut on my router lift install, I didn't quite get up against the template all the way, and in retrospect, I think that was probably because of dust. So this is not great, but it kind of is what it is. So there you go, that's what it takes to use the Harbor Freight Guide bushing set on a Harbor Freight router. I got this base plate at Amazon. I'll leave a link to that item in the description of this video in case anybody else wants one. As always, questions, comments, leave them down below. While you're there, think about hitting that subscribe button. And until we meet again, stay safe, YouTube.